Dead Pair Podcast is brought to you by Kolar Arms, America's competition shotgun, and is fueled by Fiocchi.
Welcome to the Dead Pair Podcast, coming in hot with everything you want to hear about sporting clays. With your hosts, Jason Rambo.
This is what I have to work with, everyone.
And Sean Alley.
Like I said, I was just thirsty.
Oh,
Often imitated, but never duplicated. It's the Dead Pair Podcast. It's showtime.
Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be an exciting episode. What's up, Mr. Alley? How are you, my friend?
I'm excited, Jason. It's been a while since we've done a series. It was a little over a year ago when we started The Path, and definitely anxious to get this one going.
Yeah, over 100 episodes ago. So, and joining us for this entire episode, this is really cool. We have the lovely Miss Gebben Miles with us. How are you, Karen?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely,
Karen,
our pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, the name of this episode is Novice to Master, the Foundation. Karen is our guest, and I want to prelude this and let everybody know the reason why we found it so important to have Karen on this show, this episode, is because, Karen, you and Gebben, and in fact, you yourself, you've had students that have gone from D to Master in as little as 2 months. And I think you said that you went from D to Master in under a year, right?
That's correct. Yep.
So
absolutely.
Obviously, there's something in in your program that builds such a good foundation. And I think that was important to Sean and I, and we caught that on the episode we did with you and Gebben and Joe. Right. And it was like, man, this is important to have Karen here for this. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We don't have attorney talk this week. Sean Alley, the weather's breaking. You're out shooting. I hope you're busting some birds. I know you went to a tournament here recently and it looks like you need a little tune-up. So you better pay attention to what Karen has to say.
Oh, I'm listening hard, buddy. Believe me, I'm listening hard.
Oh, I am too. Trust me. Thank God this is being recorded.
That is too funny. That is too funny. Yeah. Working up the classes is probably every shooter's goal, right? You start off and then you have something to work towards. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things as you are learning how to work your way up is having that goal to accomplish. And you get to see that when you go from D to C and then C to B and then so on and so forth.
Yeah. And I think go ahead, Jay.
Well, what I was going to say is, Karen, when a new student comes to you, I don't know, and I don't want to assume anything. So I guess this is a question. Probably one of the first things you're going to check is gun fit. Am I right?
Yeah. So a lot of times when I have someone come to me, first time maybe they've shot, or even if it's been 6 months, a year, I always like to start out with conversation, ask them how long they've been shooting, what that looks like. If it was just hunting with grandpa or, they somehow stumbled on a sporting clays range and was like, oh, this looks fun, but I have no clue what I'm doing. And so I always like to start with conversation so that I can get a good understanding of what they've done, maybe what they've learned. And a lot of times, depending on, what their story is, I'll have them shoot just a couple so I can see what they naturally want to do. Because what some people naturally want to do is way off, but then some people naturally are athletic and they stand correctly and they point the gun like an athlete, like a good shooter does. And so I like to start off with that conversation. And then from there, depending on what they naturally like to do, I always like to start from the ground up. So I start with the feet. I start with posture. I get them mounting the gun correctly. So sometimes for a brand new shooter or someone who's been hunting and maybe has an old school way of an extreme point and weight shifted completely forward, it's like, okay, let's balance that up a little bit. Let's get our feet in a more balanced position, our posture in a more balanced position, not trying to be 90-10. Some people can be like that, right? And so starting with the balance, starting with foundation and posture, working all the way up to the shoulders, and then how we actually mount the gun. And then from there, I take a look at gun fit and get them positioned correctly over the gun. If there's someone new, if it's someone who's a little bit more experienced, has been mounting the gun for a long time, that's where I'll dive into, okay, this is what we need to adjust, maybe comb height, cast a little bit, right? And have that conversation there.
Well,
Okay. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I was going to say, so Karen, on gun fit, because it is, I think, something that a lot of people take for granted. Number one, like, oh, I just bought this brand new gun, so it should fit me. You know, a lot of times, I mean, we say this all the time, you got to make sure that you have your gun shooting where you're looking. And with you, I'm sure you're looking at how they hold the gun, their length of pull, like where their eyeball is on the rib. I mean, what other things do you take into account for? And then I guess the conversation from there is, then what do you tell them to go do? I mean, do you tell them to go find a good gun fitter or a gunsmith? And you know, what's the process once you get their gun? Like, say they're brand new, they went out, they did a Sporting Clays charity event, and they rented a gun while they were there. So they were excited. They run out, they go buy a brand new gun. It doesn't fit them at all. Kind of what's your process from that point going forward?
Yeah, you politely say, okay, look, this is awesome. I'm excited that you're shooting a shotgun. It's such a fun game. And then encourage them to, like, okay, this is what we need to do. And so a lot of times, depending on that price range and the opportunity to fit them to the gun they already have is typically possible, right? Because a lot of the guns that you buy, they come with an adjustable comb. So if you have the adjustable comb, that's something that you can do. Length of pull, if it's this, if it's a lady who the length of pull is just way too long, then I typically will send them to a gunsmith who can shorten that length of pull, and I'll give them that guidance there. But yeah, most of the time you can adjust it there. Now, if you're looking for more advanced and you're starting, and let's say you've been shooting for a year and you're like, okay, I feel like this gun has gotten me where I need to, then we'll encourage the student to get a gun, a higher quality gun that's going to be able to last them for a lifetime, and then also send them to get a custom stock. Because I recently just got a custom stock this past winter in November. I've been shooting Gebben's custom stock that he shot in 2009, shortened it up a little bit, and that's what I've been shooting. And I got a custom stock from Jim Greenwood, and it is unbelievable how much nicer it is. I was shooting my Greenwood stock, and I'm like, oh, I absolutely love it. And I actually put Gebben stock back on my gun just to feel it. I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. I don't need it, So depending on how much you want to really pursue it and get good at this game, then we'll talk to the students like, hey, this is something that we need to talk about for in the future.
Well, in regards to what you were saying here a minute ago about having a conversation with them, feeling out what they're at, I want to refer everyone to the Path Part 1, which was clear back on episode 100. We covered, are you going to be a recreational shooter versus a tournament shooter, and, how much money you should really spend on equipment. So if you haven't, everybody listening, if you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and listen to that as a prelude to this one. If you've decided to be a competitive shooter, this is where this episode is going. And, going back to what you just said also, Karen, about gun fit and custom stock, one of my biggest fears is getting a custom stock. It's my own problem, but I yo-yo and weight a lot. And It's funny because I good friend of mine, Art Lavely, I shoot with him all the time down here in Florida. He's like, man, I'm seeing you chip a lot of birds. And, he looked down the rib and he goes, man, looks like you're way over the rib. Just for giggles, I went to the patterning board. The last time my gun was adjusted is when I lost a whole bunch of weight when I had my surgery and all my problems.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I gained a little bit of weight, and I'm one of those people that the weight affects my face. Like, you can see it, right? If I lose 10 pounds, you're going to see it in my face. If I gain 10 pounds, you'll see it in my face. Sure enough, my comb was off and I was shooting low and to the left. So just a simple comb height adjustment and a little bit over, and I was back over and I was centering everything where I should be. But it's that kind of stuff right there. That kind of fears me about buying a custom, having a custom stock made. Sure. But that stuff is so important, and just that's a good example. I'm not the expert that you are, Karen, but that's a good example of how your gun fit can change how you're shooting. So,
absolutely.
Once you've established the gun fit, I'm going to guess, and again, a question, do we look at eye dominance just to make sure and see where they're at? Is that your next step?
Yeah, a lot of times people like that are in B or C class, they'll be like, hey, I've had so-and-so tell me that I was left eye dominant and I shoot right-handed. If that gets brought up, then I for sure test it. Um, it's not always necessary for every single person because I feel like for me personally, something that I've learned from Gebben as well is you watch the shooter if they have a consistent miss, like on an incomer, and typically that's kind of how I start a student if they're brand new. Set them on some simpler targets, nothing too crazy technical, so that I can see if that the gun's shooting where they're looking, and I will go into that. So it's not like something that I checklist every single time, like feet, gun fit, and then eye dominance. A lot of times that comes from them either having questions or concerns. And then also if we're starting off with an incomer and I notice this right-handed shooter shooting, 2 feet left. It's like, okay, cool. We have something that we need to talk about, right? Or
Yeah.
right to left target, left to right target for, both right-handed and left-handed. And so I'll go into that and I'll figure out, okay, this is what we need to try to feel. And eye dominance is a whole nother story of its
Yeah.
own. I used to be kind of more center dominant, if that's what we want to call it, where I just simply didn't know how to point with my right eye. I was just pointing with both eyes. And it's kind of crazy, but I don't know if I could put a percentage to it, but there's so many people that come to us that have at least some form of eye dominancy issues to where maybe they're right over the nose, maybe they're at their tear ducts on both sides. Sometimes they're completely cross, it's like right-handed
Yeah.
on my left eye, man. So we got some stuff to work through, but we'll go into that depending on, again, it depends on the student, everyone's a little bit different. You'll get some people who have never shot a shotgun in their life and maybe a little bit older. Then you'll get kids who've never shot in their life, but they're very young and they haven't had any of the time to develop any bad habits, so very teachable, easy to switch if we need to from right-handed or, from the opposite hand if we need to, a little bit easier that way if the eye dominancy causes that. But yeah, gun fit is so important. Understanding how their eyes work is important. If you feel like you might not be fully right or fully left, you can simply do these little drills at home, is what we tend to have people do. Something that helped me is I would pick an object to point at. I come up and point at it with both eyes open, and then I close my non-dominant eye, check it. If I was on, awesome. If I was off, I would line everything up, open up both, and try to force myself to feel that correct mirage as I pointed at something. So I almost had to force it for a while because I wanted to keep shifting, everything would shift.
Yeah.
And so I'd come up and check and then close my eye, check it, and almost start forcing that. And so that's something that as a shooter, as you get into it, really all the way up through all the classes, that if you can understand how to point correctly, along with all the fundamental stance, posture, and gun fit, it's going to help your career drastically.
Okay, so we've kind of established the gun fit, and we've made sure that we don't have a big dominance problem. The next thing is equipment selection, and we've done a bazillion episodes on everything from glasses to hearing protection, vests, all that kind of stuff. Do you look at any of that kind of stuff with the student? Is there anything that, notable there that you do to okay, you've got the proper equipment, now we can head out to the range?
Yeah, getting the simple pouch or a vest, make sure you have eyes and ears. And it depends on how serious they're really wanting to take it. If they have, an old school pouch that's what they like to shoot in and that's comfortable for them, awesome. But if they're like, hey, I like your vest, how can I get one of those? Awesome, I can send you in that direction, right?
Right.
But really the most important piece of that equipment, in my opinion, is getting the gun to fit correctly and for it to shoot where you're looking. You can have any different types of glasses. Definitely have preferred glasses or preferred guns or preferred vests or whatever that is. But getting them something that's going to fit them and they're going to feel good with. And that could be from any of the price ranges.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. I know that, so we're kind of building the case that, for newer or less experienced shooters, this game overall, depending on where you're located, certain states have advantages over other states with, let's say, the number of courses they have, the number of the coaches are available. So it's not a one size fits all. And one of the things that always comes up is a question of, if I don't have a local coach, if I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I'm 4 hours from a coach, can I simply go to a book or a video or something like that and learn from somebody that I look up to. I mean, you guys have your videos. Anthony's got his videos. I mean, everybody's at the top of the game has got good foundational videos. In your opinion, if somebody's having a hard time, and let's just say maybe it's just a work thing. Maybe, you got a guy that he's a landscaper and he works from sun up to sundown. He doesn't have time to hit the range through the week, but he can go home at night, eat dinner, and watch a video. I mean, that's got to be better than nothing, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. With our Sporting Clays Academy that Geb and I have, we have videos on there that literally takes the shooter from the first time before they've ever pulled the trigger. Like, okay, we zoom in on our feet. How do we want our feet to look? Why do we want our feet to look like it does? How do we feel our balance? How do we get our body into the correct position so that we don't get recoil and knocked back, or we don't feel bruising in our face or in our shoulder, our hands to hurt, right? And so I think that a video or a book, if it has correct demonstration, can definitely be something that teaches people, and they can go in the week, like you said, working that whole day without getting to go to the range. You're still seeing things. If you're watching videos, you're still seeing targets. You're still hearing information about shooting. And I think that's an amazing way to be able to learn. If it's a rainy day or stormy, or, a lot of people up north in the winter don't get to shoot a whole bunch. Well, how do you keep your mind sharp? And I think you can learn through that. So learning through Sporting Clays Academy is such an amazing thing. Anthony has videos out there. I know there's so many people that have information, and I think that's a really cool thing. Just making sure that you get the right fundamentals is the most important thing that as a shooter you can do. You can have a lot of natural talent, like a lot of hunters do. They can see a bird and just go smoke it. No thought behind it. But the game of Sporting Clays is hard because it's a game of repetition, right? So we have to have that fundamental knowledge to be like, okay, how do we do this once? And then how do we repeat it? And how do we make it better every time? And that's kind of that in-depth thought process that your high-level shooters have, is like, okay, we did it once, awesome, but like we have to do that again. And so having that constant flowing of knowledge and information, I think, is how you can become a better shooter for sure.
And Karen, I like what you said there, because you're basically, people tell you all the time, focus on the process. Well, if you don't have the right process, then it's not repeatable what you've just done, right? Mm-hmm. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
So at that point, and this is a big one, it's time to choose a coach. Mm-hmm. And sure. Now I know you're going to be biased. You want them to come see you, but if they can't get to you or whatever, talk about what to look for in a coach. The first thing that comes to my mind is, do you gel with this person? Sure. Do they have the accolades to take you where you want to go? Mm-hmm. And another thing too, I kind of think it's okay in the beginning to try different coaches and see where you fit. But what would you advise someone to look for in a coach?
Yeah, no, those couple points that you just made a comment about, I think are huge. Do you gel with the person? Do they look like enjoyable people to be around? Everyone kind of gels together differently, right? I also think a big thing is watch video of how they shoot and how you want to see yourself shooting. That was something for me. Now, I guess I was a little bit biased when I started working with Tim, Gebben's dad, because he was here in Tucson. So that's who I had closest to me to take lessons. I grew up in a little farm town, Eloy, which is about an hour away from Tucson. But then as I started becoming more familiar with the game and watching videos and seeing everyone, I'm like, wow, I just absolutely love the way Gebben Miles moves the shotgun. It's slow, it's smooth, it looks connected. I'm like, that's what I want. So that's how I picked, right? So I think that's a great way to, as a newer shooter, to pick a coach, is watch videos, see how people move the gun, and if it looks good to your eye and you're like, oh, that was amazing, that looked really good, then I say go for that as well. And do research, see what people are in your area. It's hard when so many people are all the way across the country, right? It's easier for people in Arizona to get to us because we're in Arizona in the winter. But, when we're all across the country, people in Arizona might have to fly to us or right. And so you have that same thing with the Northeast and even in the Southeast. You have your different coaches in those different areas. And so finding those different areas where those coaches might be. But again, accolades as well is something that's big. I think look for consistency. You have a lot of people who know the game. They've been doing the game for a really long time. Look for consistency and also the passion for the game. I think is important too, because the more enthused they are about the game, the more enthused that the coach is going to be in the lesson. And that's ultimately so important. Yes, it's a job, but I think the best coaches don't treat it as a job. They truly just enjoy giving a lesson and getting people to break more targets. So that's ultimately where I love it too. It's fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my learning experience. And so that's my goal specifically as a coach, to get people to enjoy their shooting experience and learning, and go from there. And I know there's so many good coaches in the game. And so there's plenty of knowledge. Just find that person that's right for you. And there's nothing wrong with trying multiple different coaches. You'll find the style that works best for you, And I think that's an important thing to understand, is you don't know what you don't know. So your goal as a student is to take the information and try it. And if it works, awesome, stick with it. But if it doesn't, you can still say you tried it and it was like, I tried it. I'm going to keep it in my toolbox, but maybe not the direction that I need to go in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to comment on that is, you and Gebben, and there's some other coaches that are doing it now too, is a lot of online coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
For remote coaching, if you will, somebody that can't get to see you. But would you agree that the initial lesson probably should be in person, right? I mean, like it's kind of hard to see gun fit and what's going on, all that stuff if it's remote. Don't you agree that initial lesson should be in person?
Yeah, definitely. It's way more helpful for the coach and also for the shooter to have fundamentals from the ground up. So if someone came to me and was like, "Hey, Karen, I've never shot a shotgun in my life, but I want to start shooting sporting clays. What do?" I would say, get with the coach the very first time you go out and shoot. Have someone teach you the very first time those correct fundamentals, to where you're moving the gun with the target without even pulling the trigger with the live shell. Like that's just something so simple but important. And that's what I would recommend, is get with a coach early on, so that there's not many habits that a coach will have to break down to get there. And then from there, once you get the first one, like specifically with our Sporting Clays Academy, we'll have people come to us and, well, hey, you live here, look into Sporting Clays Academy, and if you like it, let us know. And they're like, okay. And then they start understanding some of our language and understanding that. Or if they're like with us having Joe Finese on there, having some of his language and understanding that is a huge thing. But I also do know that there's great information out there, to where if you haven't ever shot, you do the correct research, you can start with the good fundamentals. So we had a student on Sporting Clays Academy. Before he had ever taken a lesson from us in person, he became a subscriber. He went from D to master class in 2 years, with just watching the videos. That was
Really?
it, without coming to us. And then there was, I think, maybe, I'd have to double check with Gebben, because this was just a couple of years ago, but we did do like an in-person lesson with him. We met up with him somewhere in the US and worked with him for a few hours. He did a tandem lesson where he booked both Gebben and I at the same time. And then from there, he's just continues to go up. And so that was one of those experiences where he did so much research. He scrolled through all of Sporting Clays Academy. He started from the foundation, and then he would go out and he'd have his phone with him on the course, and he'd watch, hey, I need to watch Gebben shoot a quartering bird, or I need to watch Gebben and Karen shoot a 30-yard teal. And so he would watch it, and then he'd go and try to do it. And that was something that helped him and allowed him to progress from D class to master without ever taking that in-person lesson, until shortly after he made it to master and was like, okay. And these are, local tournaments that he's shooting. I think he's from Texas. So there's definitely good competition out there. So it says something that he could be able to do that. But it is way easier most of the time. 90% of the time, I would say, 95% of the time, if you could start off with the coach, get the correct fundamentals early on, so that once you have that confidence that all that's right, it's way easier to dive into the technicalities of the game.
All right, so I'm going to switch gear to probably the obvious statement that's a little bit more difficult for people than they might come to think. After you go visit your coach, the big thing is the homework that they give you to work on, right? I mean, and a problem for everybody, which myself included, is finding the time and being disciplined enough to go out to the range and practice. whether it's once a week or once a weekend or however often you can, find the time or afford it, because obviously everybody's got different financial obligations. So one person might be able to shoot, 1,000 rounds a month. Another person might only shoot a couple hundred rounds a month. So, when you look at it that way, Karen, if you're going to kind of just take a middle of the road stance, or you want to make a middle of the road statement, when a new student comes to you, what are your expectations for them as far as how much they should be practicing, and then how much do they need to practice before they come back to you for that next lesson?
We always tell them to practice as much as they can. And so if that's time limited or money limited, right, that's okay, as long as they're going into their practices with intention and a goal to accomplish, right? That's where we really see progress from the first lesson to the second lesson. And everyone's a little bit different. Sometimes people can come take a lesson every month, and they'll work with us for a couple days every month. And then it's like, okay, go do your homework, go practice as much as you can. And one thing that we don't enjoy, and I actually experienced this with my own lessons, me taking lessons from Tim, I would take a lesson on Friday, and then I'd come back on the next Friday, to take a lesson from Tim. And he's like, hey, how'd your practice go? Well, I didn't get to. And this was early on in my career. And so I had to go through this to learn. I was like, oh, I actually didn't get to practice what I had learned. And so that's a really huge thing. Trying to share that with people is, a lesson is wonderful, but it's up to you to be able to take that information and go start applying it to where you can ingrain it into your mind, where it becomes subconscious, right? And so I don't know if there's a perfect number, a perfect amount of time, because every student is different, depending on if they get to go out and practice once a week in between your lessons, or, if they practice 3 times a week, awesome. Maybe it can become more frequent, right? If you're working 3 times a week, maybe instead of taking, a lesson every 2 months, you can go a lesson every month, or even shorter if that's what you financially can afford, right?
Yeah.
The more information, the more time you can spend perfecting your craft. That's ultimately what's going to take you to a higher level quicker. I took lessons from Tim once a week for 2 years, pretty much, close, missing a few weeks here and there, right? And then with Gebben, COVID year, I shot with him probably 3 times a week taking a lesson, and then I'd shoot another 2 to 3 times, just my own practice. So
Wow.
I spent a lot of time. I shot 60,000 rounds that year, so I was really, really
Holy
devoted.
cow.
Really devoted to learning. But time and COVID allowed me to do that, so I was able to get after that. But with me taking that time and applying it, that's one thing that helped me progress to getting more at the top, right? And so every student's a little bit different. It doesn't have to be a lot either. If you can only go and practice for an hour, go practice for an hour. It doesn't have to be 2 cases of shells in a day. It could be a good, solid 75 to 100 shells through the gun, where you're applying something, you're working on a goal, and then that's going to help you make that progress. It's not always about just trying to cram as much as you can into one day. You want those good quality practices.
Well, okay. So now I want to go down another avenue, because that was awesome, because I think that's perfect. I mean, I think everybody has to make a decision on A, what they can afford, and then B, how much time can you really put towards it? Because if you're not out there practicing, taking lessons is great and all, like you said, but you really need to work by yourself, because at the end of the day, you're out there by yourself at a tournament, right? So, and that's your ultimate scorecard.
Yep, absolutely. You can't have a coach behind your shoulder every single shot that you take, unfortunately.
It'd be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At some point, the student has to take the test, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
So another thing to look at, Karen, is, again, going back to my comment about like how all states aren't equal. One of the big things that Jason and I experienced in our journey, from when we started shooting competitively and then starting to travel around to the big tournaments, which all too well, there's a value into shooting different tournaments because of the type of target setter and the type of targets they set. So you kind of learn from that. A new shooter initially is usually kind of gun shy. I'm looking back at like what Jason and I did. We kind of stayed away from some of the bigger tournaments, thinking we weren't good enough to go to those. And that was probably the wrong thing to think about, because in the end, the class system is there for a reason, and you're basically trying to shoot along with people that are the same skill level with you, give or take. But how soon do you start pushing? Like, say, somebody's grown up in Florida or Ohio or Texas, great shooting states, a lot of ability, a lot of clubs and places to go shoot. But at what point do you really start pushing people to start going out there, traveling around, because there is a lot to learn from the different target setters that set these big events like a US Open, like a Nationals? When do you kind of give them that nudge and say, okay, it's time to get going?
Yeah, I think typically, people start with local shoots at their local club and doing the monthly shoots that they have there, which are going to tend to not be as challenging as we do get the US Open or our regional events. And so gaining experience there, shooting different events, 5 stand super, preliminary, all of those different ones I think is very helpful for gaining that experience. I ultimately, again, it kind of goes back to the shooter. If you're ambitious and you're like, hey, I love this game and I want to go see different places, I'm like, go for it. It won't be wasted time. It won't be wasted money. It's going to be gained experience. And you have to go through things in order to learn from them. And so I think, as soon as that shooter is feeling comfortable in some of their game plan and their process, gaining experience with some of the local tournaments, I don't think it's ever too soon to go and, well, okay, maybe let me change that. You don't want to go to a US Open for your first tournament, right?
Right.
You don't want to get thrown into the deep end too quick. But I do think going to a US Open and gaining the experience of a big tournament, different events, maybe harder targets as well, can create more hunger for learning the game, more hunger to want to go to a coach and gain that experience. Hey, look, I just went here. I have no clue. I've never seen let's even say 60-yard crosser. I've never seen one of those. How do I shoot it? Cool. Let's work on something, and that gives ambition for students to want to learn. I don't know if there's a perfect time again that I could say, oh, compete for 2 months and then go to a tournament. It's really based off of the comfortability of the shooter. And I shot local tournaments here in Arizona. I grew up in the SCTP, so I had tournament experience shooting trap tournaments, skeet tournaments, and stuff like that. And then I shot a couple local wintertime Tucson tournaments. And then in 2018, it was like, okay, I'm going to go to my first big shoot. And I think the regional here, actually, no, it might have been the US Open here in Tucson. That was like one of my first big tournaments here. And it was part of all around also. So it had international skeet and bunker. So I just, again, thrown in the deep end, but it was so good to see people, to see those challenging targets, to be able to shoot and get that experience is something that you can't just get. Like, you have to go through it, gain that experience, learn from it, and that helps your career path for sure.
Okay, now I'm switching gears. Something that Sean and I are guilty of, way more guilty Sean than me, is note taking and journaling, that kind of thing. The only thing Sean's ever wrote down that has anything to do with sporting clays is probably like a question for a guest we're having on the show here. So
easy.
But hey, no, listen, Sean, I'm guilty of it too. How much do you recommend to a student that they journal or note take their progress or what they need to do for homework, or talk about that a little bit? Is that something that you influence in especially a newer student?
Yeah, I think taking notes and taking a few key points from a lesson is so important. One thing that I like to encourage my students is, hey, I want you to think of 3 major points that stuck out to you today. And when you get home, I want you to type them out or write them on a piece of paper and then send me a picture or send me a copy of it. And what that does is that really allows them to think about, 1, what they might have learned in the lesson, and then 2, when you write it or when you type it, that allows your mind to remember it easier and quicker. There's times where, and again, me too, I learned something in my first lesson and then it finally clicked in my 5th lesson, right? I had to hear the same thing so many times before, it really stuck out to me and made a difference. And so I think note taking Gab and I constantly are at these different tournaments, and you start seeing maybe a certain target that I'm missing or struggling or not connecting with as well. Or even if it's just a chip, it's like, ooh, I got away with that one. I need to work on connection with that because that target makes me feel a little uneasy. So we'll take notes. Okay, this is something that I need to work on. And hearing other things from other people as well is something that you can take notes of. So journaling, note taking, it's a great thing because you can sit down and read it. You hear it, but we see we learn multiple different ways. But, being able to have those different ways of learning is an important thing. And you can take a look at your notes next time you go out to practice and get your mind focused on those things. So maybe that's, let's say, my posture and getting a game plan as far as break points goes. Let's say those are two of the key points that you needed to work on. You can go into that practice, take a look at them. Okay, yeah, this is my feet are going to be the first thing that I check, and then I'm going to be specific with where I want to break the target. All of a sudden that's already giving you purpose in your practice that you might have just not remembered if you didn't have those notes. It's definitely helpful for a lot of people. So I'm a huge proponent for it, for sure.
Okay, and now here's something, and I think you and Gebben do this. I mean, I've kind of seen it. I've paid attention to how you work with some of your students and stuff. But one thing that people kind of lose track of or sight of sometimes is keeping it fun. We do this because it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's very few people at the top of this game that are making the mortgage payment from shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm guilty of it myself. There's been times when I've dove so hard into it and so deep into it. I mean, just like, I got to practice, got to train. And, going to tournaments and stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, I got to step back and take a breather here because I'm getting to the point where this feels like more work than it does fun.
Right.
If you hit that point, wouldn't you agree, Karen, that, hey, we need to keep this a little bit more lighthearted. We have to remember, there's serious work to do if you want to make it to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get there, there's even more work to do. But you have to have fun in this journey up, right?
Absolutely. Enjoy your learning experience. Enjoy the ups and enjoy the downs. And that's what we tend to not do, is enjoying those times that are tough. And then it gets you into going through the motions. Oh, we're just here at another shoot. It's really hard. I'm not shooting as well as I'd like to. And then all of a sudden you're not having fun. And so remembering why you do it. What got you to start? Was it the target just exploding when you pulled the trigger? Was that something that excited you? Or was it the concept of the game and the score that was really fun for you or was it fun for you to see these different types of targets that you've never seen before and see if we can hit them, right? And as we gain more experience, then we create expectation. We create this frustration when we don't perform to the ability we know we can. And that takes the fun out of it. So one thing that Gebben and I do is we try to play games. It's something silly, but it's helpful. Have something to accomplish in a goal, right, for your practice.
Yeah.
Yesterday, my dad, and Gebben and I, we all practiced there at my parents' farm, and we were going for 4 pair in a row. And there was a couple of times where 4 pair in a row, that last pair, we'd miss some. And it's like, this is frustrating. But then you have to kind of sit back and be like, hold on. Let's put this into perspective. Yes, this is my career. This is what I do for a living. It's what Gebben does. But if I can just remind myself, have fun, enjoy breaking the target, enjoy seeing your execution, enjoy planning for this crazy hard target, or even planning for this little fluffy target that makes you nervous, right? And so reminding yourself in that pre-shot, I think, is important to be like, what? Have fun, enjoy the execution, enjoy the learning moment, enjoy shooting targets that you've never seen before, an experience that you've never had before, and allow that execution and allow that work that you put into it just to clear your mind and relax and let it happen. There's going to be times where we have success, and there's times that we don't succeed as well as we'd like, but you learn from them, and that ultimately is what makes you better. So always have fun. If you need to, shoot, play a game, play horse, play, we play closest to the tower. We'll throw a tower up there and we'll just break it normal. And then it's like, who can shoot it the closest to the tower? And it's like, pull bang. And you break it and then you miss, and it's like, okay, cool, that was fun. And you end of practice feeling good, giggling with everyone. Oh, how far off of the ground could you shoot it? So you
Right.
can create some fun things that you can do to keep the fun after or even before you go to work and you put in that work.
Yeah. And there's still some skill to learn there too while you're
Yeah,
doing that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So very silly example, but Sean and I, we would volunteer for a lot of the Ronald McDonald's House charity shoots, the kids in clay shoots.
Mhm.
And oh boy, please no one send out the pitchforks and torches. But they call us the quote unquote pro for a day, and we would go out with a squad,
Yeah.
and it's usually people that have done well for themselves in life,
Mhm.
and they're there to shoot a shotgun and have fun. After we go through all the safety stuff, well, anyway, we had gone through all the safety stuff, and I was with this squad, and we shot a station, and I look around, and nobody's smiling. And
Mm.
I'm like, wait, hold on a minute. The guy went to step in the box. I said, hold on a minute. And I looked at everybody and I says, what do you do for a living? He's like, oh, I'm a doctor. What do you do for a living? I'm an attorney. And we're going through the list. I'm like, gee, Christmas. This group of guys right here makes more in a day than I do in 10 years. But anyway, I said, would anybody here rather be at the office? And they're all like, oh, no. And I'm like, well, then would somebody smile? We're
Mhm.
blowing stuff up and having fun. And
Mhm.
it completely changed the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
And we had so much fun and they started breaking more targets just because of that. It's like I had to remind them, hey guys, we're here to have fun.
Yep.
And all of a sudden that whole attitude, the whole atmosphere changed, and they started being more perceptive to what
Mhm.
I was telling them.
Yeah.
And but I think that's the point is we have to remind ourselves we shoot this game because it's fun.
Right.
And yes, there is a time to take it serious when we're in the box. But when we step out of the box, regardless of, if you miss that pair, that doesn't mean somebody's coming to repo your truck or anything,
Mhm.
I mean, understand that you're doing this for fun. So, and it's hard. We all get caught up in it, but we
Mhm.
have to kind of keep that mindset, right?
Yep, correct. No, get rid of the expectations, and then go and put in the work, and then ultimately have fun and just let it happen and enjoy your experience.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, so we've kind of covered the basics of like a newer shooter, a D or C class shooter. They come into the sport, they got excited for some reason, they wanted to do it, they bought a gun. We've talked about the stance, we've talked about the gun fit, we've talked about all the mechanical things that are so important, the foundation to build upon. And if they don't get that right, then, they're going to struggle the rest of their days for the most part. But at some point, you also start thinking about the mental game. So after you kind of get your stance down, after you get your gun fit down, after you get your, you know what your gear is, everything's kind of fit for you. You're learning the game. You're actually getting in there. You kind of know what you're doing. And then the next big step to this game is actually the mental side of things. When do you find it's the right time for somebody to kind of go to that next step and actually start really focusing on their mental game?
That's a great question. So, one thing that I like to tell a lot of people is if I can have confidence in my physical game, my mental game is already going to be naturally a little bit better, right? Because a lot of times our mental game is because we have doubt on if we can hit the target, if we have the correct plan, or if we know how to even shoot this target, right? But if I can have confidence that my fundamentals, as far as my posture, my stance, but also then diving into someone who's really ready to go after it, we'll dive into more technical thought process on how do we actually plan for a target. When I look at a target, what do I try to see, right? And from there, that further thought process into some more technical physical moves that carries into the mental game. And so, like I said, if my physical game is confident, if I'm confident that I'm doing the right things, that's going to ultimately boost the confidence for my mental game. And then from there, I think it's a big thing from experience. You go through things, you allow golf carts to distract you, you allow people talking to distract you. I can just tell you, hey, don't let it distract you. But yeah, that's great. But you have to go through it in order to learn from it. And I still feel that sometimes. It's like, oh, I just let that golf cart driving past bother me, and my mind went in a different direction. And so I have to learn me. I have to learn how do I think, how do I process things. And so that's what I like to encourage my students in some of those. It's like, hey, what was your thought? What did you think about before you shot this pair? Was there thought, or was there any thought? Those are me just asking questions, because when I ask questions, they start asking themselves questions. And that's part of them learning how they think. When I start spinning, is what I call it, my mind just starts going crazy. What do I do to calm everything down? Well, one of my natural little things is I take my glasses off and I clean them. Allows me to think. It allows me to take a couple deep breaths. Then I throw my glasses back on and I'm trying to get back into process. And so, as far as timing goes, it's really, I think the timing's right when you can start. Let me rewind a little bit. I think you can start teaching mental game fundamentals in the very beginning. What are we thinking about? Why do we want to do these? Why do I want to stand correctly? Why do I want to mount the gun correctly? Those are some physical things, obviously, but they also can carry into your mental game as well. And then as you start really saying, "Hey, I'm in D class, and my goal is to get to C class," I think you can start teaching mental game there in D class. I don't think you have to wait until they really decide to pursue something, because that's going to be the mental game is something you are always continuing to learn. Gebben has been shooting for 25 plus years. He still continues to learn how his mind is handling things. What is something that can help him get back into the place that he needs to? And same for me. I know that probably the case for every top shooter out there is we're always learning that mental game. And so I think it's something you can start early on, keeping it simple, and then they can build a strong mental game as you go forward and you continue to learn more physical techniques.
Karen, this is the part of the show where I want you to kind of speak freely. And what I mean by that is I want you to make your own job easier for you. Because when people start down the path, it's easy to develop the bad habits that coaches like you and Gebben have to work so hard to try and correct. Is there anything from a foundation standpoint that we haven't covered that you think is important to try and prevent those bad habits?
That's a good question.
I kind of put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did put me on the spot. No, that's good. That's good. I think for all coaches, it's, there's so many different things out there. So people go to all the magazines and they read, they go to all the videos and they watch, and so there's a lot of information. Then some people can overwhelm themselves with it.
Yeah.
So sometimes they can have all these thoughts. Oh, hey, do I do this? Do I do this? Like, let's do what feels naturally comfortable for you. I think what would make my job easier as a shooter coming into me, I'm not actually quite sure how I want to answer that.
I think you're right. There's so much information out there. It's kind of hard to filter and decipher all of it, right? And
yeah,
maybe let's not spend so much time on, different Facebook groups and all that and focus on what the coach is telling you. Maybe I don't know.
Absolutely. And like, I think it goes to fundamentals. Hey, if we can, it's going to be best for you and best for me if we can stick to fundamentals, keep it simple, and we'll continue to work on that and grow that and expand it. Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, first thing they want to work on is sometimes, hey, I shoot this technique. I want to learn this technique. Well, it's like, well, we actually have some different things that we need to talk about before we even get to that point. Right. Hey, I struggle on this. Okay, cool. We're going to get to that eventually, but we've got to first adjust the feet because they're a little bit too wonky, And so I think for me, I just always like to teach those fundamentals. And Gebben he continues to challenge me with this. Like, again, yesterday we were shooting and as I started and was getting warmed up, I was a little rusty with my thought process and my planning. And he's like, hey, you keep missing on your third pair. I'm like, huh, I do. He's like, are you changing anything in your pre-shot? Are you running it completely? And I sat there and thought, and immediately I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm running it. But then I thought about it. I'm like, I might be cutting it short. Maybe I'm cutting my deep breath short or whatever those last few words that I say. And so that fundamental thing you never outgrow it. And so as a new shooter coming in, what makes coaches' jobs easier is you taking your notes you paying attention and you picking a few couple key points to work on as you go out into your practice, and then come back and we'll have something to expand off of. One of the worst things is when we work on something, then there isn't that note taking or practice going forward. And it's like, okay, we're doing another lesson, but we have to continue to remind them of the stuff that we learned in the first lesson, if that makes sense, So seeing that from a coach standpoint, absolutely love it when people are like, hey, they'll reach out a week later, hey, I've been doing this practice, I did this goal, or I did this training drill and I accomplished this goal, and we're like pumped, awesome. We're going to be able to expand on so much more the next lesson, and that's something that is really encouraging for me personally. I know for Gebben as well. And I would assume for all coaches is when people work on stuff and then come back with eagerness to continue to expand that knowledge.
Very cool. Well, Karen, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us. And I'm going to make sure and include your contact information down the show description. So if anybody listening to this wants a lesson with you, or maybe they have a question or some advice they're looking for that we haven't covered here on this foundation, I know you. I know you'd be more than happy to answer a question or a phone call. So thank you, Karen, very much for joining us. Sean Alley, we have started this new little 3-part series here with the foundation. And if somebody's listening to this, they're excited, or they're going to get started, or maybe they are an experienced shooter and they want their buddy to listen to this, what do we tell everybody every week?
Well, first things first, turn them on to us. First of all, go listen to the Dead Pair. We've got an awful lot of great coaches and other people in the shooting industry that you can learn a lot from. You can go back for almost 5 years we've been doing this, and hopefully we've put out enough good information to at least get a good grasp. And if nothing else, you can find a lot of people that you can make phone calls to and talk to them directly, because people like Karen are the ones that we try to get on the show in order to expand their knowledge, or to share their knowledge and expand our listeners' knowledge. And that's the first step. But the second step is, as shooters all the way across the board, we need to keep working on growing our sport. And you do that by inviting people out. You do that by taking them out, putting a gun in their hands, show them the ropes, let them break their first clay. Chances are they're going to smile, they're going to love it, and then you've got somebody that's hooked for life. And all it takes is just a little bit of time and a little bit of effort on your part to get them out there, and let the rest of it happen on its own.
Excellent. Karen, thank you again for joining us. This has been great, and I think the information you shared here, people are going to get a lot out of it. Even an experienced shooter, I think, is going to enjoy some of this and maybe might refresh their memory on some things. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for having me. I enjoy this game and I love it so much. So I'm thankful that I can share a little bit of what I know, and hopefully encourage more people to love the game and have a desire to be better shooters.
Well, I am going to share one little quick tidbit of our phone call earlier last week that we had when Gebben was on the phone. We do have some stuff coming up. We're going to have Gebben join us, but like I told him, sorry, ladies first. So thank you, Karen, for joining us. Yeah, Sean Alley, this has been awesome, man. I can't wait for the next part of this series. And Sean, good questions today. Glad I wrote them down for you. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But hey, everyone, don't forget the Dead Pair Kolar drawing is still out and available. And that gun, time you're hearing this is probably going to be a little after the U.S. Open, but the gun will be is now available to be seen at shoots wherever Kolar is present. Get over and take a look at that thing. Get your raffle ticket. Don't forget about our great sponsors, RE Ranger and Taconic Distilleries. They're both offering discounts. If you purchase from them online, just use the code DEADPAIR10 at checkout. That's DEADPAIR. The numbers 1 and 0, no spaces. DEADPAIR10 at checkout. Save 10% off your order. Sean Alley, great episode, my friend. Until next week.
We want to say a big thank you to Karen Miles, number one.
Yes.
And number two, we all can't wait to see you back here on the Dead Pair Podcast.
We'll see you next time on the Dead Pair Podcast.
The Dead Pair Podcast is brought to you by Kolar Arms, the mark of performance, and is fueled by Fiocchi USA. The Dead Pair theme song was written, arranged, and produced by Toby Tomplay. Special thanks to the following sponsors: Atlas Traps, Ranger Performance Eyewear, Rhino Chokes, Long Range LLC, Taconic Distillery, Score Chaser, and Clay Range Design Works.